Good to see you guys.
Good to see you
Hey,
again.
we missed you, Coach.
Yeah. Nice day in Michigan today.
Yeah, it's a little bit warmer anyway.
Almost looks like California.
102 over there.
No.
Yeah, it's 102 right here.
Ah,
But, you know, when that's your office, you're all right.
yeah. Good.
We'll be jumping in that right after this interview. Hey, Andy, why don't you do us all a favor and introduce Bob to everybody? And Bob's not going to brag about his own accolades, so I'm going to ask you to brag about his accolades.
Yeah, he's a little bit too humble for his own shirt.
That's okay. Bob, you just sit back for a couple seconds and let Andy introduce you and brag about you, and then we'll ask you some questions. All right?
And correct me if I get any of this wrong. So today we got Bob Taylor on with us, Uncle Bob, as he's known around our house. Bob is a longtime college coach at Oakland University and Northwood. He's the only Michigan coach to make the NCAA tournament as a men's and women's coach, college coach. He's from a small town in Sparta, Michigan, which is on the west side of the state. And now he's concentrating on training kids in a little bit different way than people have been doing. And it's sort of a back to basics and a back to old school way of training kids how to play basketball. And I think it's really great. And some of his ideas are just awesome. So I'll let him take it away and sort of explain.
Well, he also wrote a book, didn't he?
Absolutely. He's got a really good book on that people will give a link to, that people can order and look at that and read it and know that it's got a lot of good content in there. He's also got a website, and he's kind of in the midst of all this. He's building all this right now, and I think it's going to be a great thing for youth and for parents.
That's very cool. Bob, let me ask you a question. How'd you get to you got the luxury or the honor to coach both boys and girls basketball? How'd that all go down?
Well, it's kind of a different story, but I went to Lake Superior State as a men's assistant coach.
Uh-huh.
And I was a men's assistant coach, and then halfway through my second year, the head women's coach became the department head. The department head at Lake Superior State, which is in Sault Ste. Marie in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, he got narcolepsy, and he basically was falling asleep at the cabinet meetings, and basically they felt they had to make a change, and it was in the middle of the year, so they didn't really have a budget to make a change, and they kept everybody's salary similar. So I became the women's head coach, men's assistant coach, which I did for a couple of years in Sault Ste. Marie. And then we had some success there, and then I became the head women's coach at Oakland University. I coached there for a while, and then the job at Northwood University for the men's opened up. A really good friend of mine named Dean Lockwood left the job, and I became the men's head coach at Northwood University. So I kind of went into it with the boys from the men's side, and then I switched over to the girls' side, then back to the men's side.
What do you prefer? Or is that even a fair question?
You know, I like them both. I like the way, actually, it's funny you say that, because a friend, actually was a friend of mine, but a guy named Chuck Daly was the coach of the Pistons at the time.
Yeah.
And we practiced, the girls at Oakland practiced right after the Pistons practice, because the Pistons didn't have the practice facilities. You know, things were much different then. I remember Coach Daly would come up to my office sometime for chalk to put on the chalkboard of the practice at the gym at Oakland University, and then I gave him this big playboard that he would use. I gave him felt tip pens and the posy pens, and that's how they used it. People can't believe that the NBA was like that then, but it really was. And he always would say, watch the girls practice for a while, just a great guy. And he said, wouldn't it be great if we could combine guys and girls, you know, get the girls to be more competitive like the guys. And then wouldn't it be great if we get the guys to listen more like the girls do?
Yeah.
So I kind of use that with my own kids with that in mind, kind of. You know, with my girls, I always try to make them more competitive. With my son, I try to pay more attention, you know, to listen more, to do it. So I like both of them. I like the idea of the competitiveness of the guys, and I like the idea that the girls were coachable, you know, a little bit more
Yeah.
coachable at times. So I liked them both, and I did them both about evenly. So I guess it's fair to say that I like them both.
Did I hear you right when you said you were the head women's coach and the assistant men's coach?
At Lake Superior State.
Yeah. How in the wide world of sports did you have enough time in the day to do all that? Because I mean, the games are going on at the same time, aren't they? Weren't they the same season or not?
Right, and at that time, and it still is, the GLIAC, which is the league that we were in, the Great Lakes Intercollegiate Athletic Conference,
Yeah.
played double headers. So the girls played first, the guys played second. A lot of the time, there were some non-conference games where I, you know, basically were with the girls when we played together. And then at practices, I was there. I worked for a guy named Bud Cooper, who they named the gym after at Lake Superior State. And I always said, you know, he taught us he taught hard work, you know, and at that time, I think, actually, in all fairness, I was the men's and women's tennis coach. I was the women's head coach and the men's assistant coach for a while at Lake Superior State. You know, I was 25 years old and kind of did a little bit of everything.
A couple of guys we talked to, Bob, too, like have similar, not backgrounds, but working at smaller schools like that, it kind of gave them opportunity to do some other stuff that they had to out of necessity. But it's sort of interesting to hear that too, because I had never heard that about you, and it's those smaller schools sort of sometimes provide bigger opportunity for guys to get involved in different stuff, and guys that sometimes it's guys that never played or never had any college experience themselves doing it, and they got into coaching because they were into something else, and they were just needed.
Yeah, you guys remember Green Acres and Hee Haw, Mr. Haney? I had 4 cards sometimes. I would go into a high school. I had a card for the men's tennis coach, the women's tennis coach, the women's basketball coach, and the boys tennis coach. You know, I remember the thing, hey, I need a lawyer. Well, good to meet you. I want to talk to somebody. Oh, nice to see you too. You know, I need to see the sheriff. Well, what you want? And I basically would go to schools a lot of times. I was there on a girls' basketball visit, but I might coach the men. I give them my men's tennis card or whatever. So a little bit of everything.
That's good stuff.
Hey, talk a little bit about, Bob, talk a little bit about the end of your college career coaching, and then how you've moved into what you're doing now, and your recognition of how, you know, what you're doing now is sort of needed, and having that experience as a college coach, and why you think that what you're doing is the right thing for youth.
Well, one of the things I did, I grew up through what I call the camp route. Like I grew up with Wolverine camps. I grew up with working Don Meyer's basketball camps. A lot of coaches grow up to what I call the AAU route, or, you know, they want to flip players into the boat for the players, you know, for the coach, the head coach. But I grew up working camps since I was 18, 19 years old. So I had that experience of working with younger kids. And then when I got involved with Coach Meyer a lot, you know, I started copying a lot of things that he did. And some summers when I was at Oakland, between Oakland Wolverine and a camp we had in Traverse City, Michigan, we had 2,000 kids this summer at our camp. So I was able to deal with a lot of those kind of things, and it wasn't a shock to me. So when I got out of coaching at Northwood, I started a basketball program in Midland, Michigan. And then I started coaching my daughter's 5th grade team. She was on the 5th grade team, and one story that I think goes a long way with the book and what we did is in 5th and 6th grade and 7th grade, we were getting beat. We were getting beat by teams in Midland, Michigan. We were getting beat bad. But the long story is in 8th grade, we won the AAU state championship. Every kid on our team made varsity as a freshman. And in the class of 2017, every one of them played in college. So I began with what I call the end in mind. And I think a lot of it was helpful to me in that I grew up a generation different than even my wife. And I remember the playgrounds and the park and the driveway. And I was watching how other kids were learning, and I was like, this can't work. Like, I don't relate to what they're doing out here. I don't get it. You know, they're putting the cone in the chair out there, and they, you know, we had kids in our basketball club that had learned 8 to 10 plays and never played one-on-one in their life. I'm like, well, wait a second, this is not going to get it, you know. And so we kind of flipped the curve a little bit. Like in my book, I called it flipping the ladder. Like we did not deal with tactics at all. Even all the way through 8th grade, we never dealt with what I call tactics. We dealt with instincts and feel and concept. And we tried to do it like that. When my son RJ was a second grader, he's a 9th grader now, but when he was in second grade, he was in second grade playing on a 4th grade kind of club team, if you would. They had 17 plays. They had 17 plays. And he's a second grader. And I'm like, well, some of these kids can't dribble with their left hand. Some of these kids don't know how to pass and cut, And so I think it was my experience of growing up through the parks, through the playground, that realized that's some important level. Why do we miss that? And so basically I said in our practices, we want to bring the playground back to the youth practice. I kind of coined the phrase of what I was doing as the playground on steroids. Let's bring it faster. We play 2-on-2, no dribble. Or we say, okay, we're going to play 3-on-3, but you can't go above the free throw line. And then we say, okay, now you don't have any dribbles. And then we play for about a half hour, and I say, okay, how many people missed shots that they would have made, their team would have won? Well, they all raised their hand, of course, So let's go make 20 of those shots before we come back. Go get a drink of water. You got to make 20 of those shots, and let's come back. So we kind of taught them how to teach themselves, if you would. And then we had some very aggressive parents. We had some parents who were really involved, and they started working with their kids. And like I said, it was kind of a stonewall where in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, there's a team in town called the Magic. They would beat us by 20 points, but they were pressing us, trapping us. Our little 5th graders couldn't throw the ball at the other side of the press. Yeah. And then by 8th grade, like I said, we won the state championship. And we were the best team, and our kids all made varsity as a freshman, which to me, that I try to highlight in the book, what is the end in mind? Do I want my kid to win a 6th grade championship, or do I want to play varsity basketball? And my goal was to make the varsity as a freshman. So that's sort of where we went. And I think that's a big thing for parents now. They associate the winning team with the best team. And that's one of the things I'm going to try to change.
I got you. Coach, do you have your book there? You could hold it up.
I do.
Everybody. The Old Man in the Gym. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, we call it because and we were real specific since I coached, women for a long time. I was the old man in the gym. I wasn't trying to say that you have to be a man to be the old man in the gym. Like basically, it's a spirit. It's an attitude. Like we used to go to parks and open gyms and play, and there were old guys on the side of the court. And they were just watching. They're wearing their dickies, and they were just kind of going there. My mom and dad would drive me down to Aberdeen Park in Grand Rapids, and there's hundreds of players playing there, and there's guys who we'd win or lose. They come over, they say, hey, young fella, why don't you try this, or why don't you try that? It wasn't spoon-fed learning. It was kind of the way I think kids should learn. And we would play in the park in Sparta, Michigan, and the alumni would come by, and they would just kind of give us what we call tips. They say, oh, yeah, they're teaching us how to play old man's game. And that part of it, to me, is the essence of what I think has been lost. And I'm trying to bring back, and that play them through. And one of the things I've said is, like, I can teach through instincts and concepts. If I'm teaching those things, I can teach them fundamentals. But if I'm teaching them just fundamentals, I can't teach them instincts and concepts, inside of that. So I think we have to take a look at how we're doing it. And I think because, again, I saw it, I really am a big believer, and that's how kids should learn.
So, Coach, as a listener, like I am a listener, and I have children of my own, and I were to send them to camp, for any listener that wants to send their kid to one of your camps, what do they expect to
it's a little bit different. We're a little bit different in that the marketing company and people are trying to understand. I don't really think I'm a trainer. I'm more like, I'd like to think like an enlightenment. Somebody said, well, how do you
Jedi master of basketball?
Right. And I said, like, I'd be more like Robin Williams in the Dead Poets Society. Rip that page out and forget about that page and forget that. Why are we dribbling around these cones and chairs when these kids don't even know, we're teaching them how to shoot. They don't even know if they're open or not, So I think first things first, and that was, to me, get them to play, get them to do what I call the instincts and feel are, to me, truly the new fundamentals. we're not teaching kids to feel the game or get it like Robin Williams would say. No, don't teach them to recite poetry. Teach them to love the poetry.
Yeah.
Kind of what I'm trying to say.
I got you.
How do you feel like about, and I know this is probably, and how would you change maybe how you handled things before, knowing what you know now in terms of, because you're trying to build a culture of parents and kids and their understanding of how to really play the game of basketball. And when you're in a situation, and we talked with a couple of guys about this, when you're in a situation where the end goal now at most of the universities is you got to win games, and that's the only thing that people are worried about now, and they don't necessarily find the really good things or the small successes that you might recognize as a coach. But now, as you're building a culture of kids to sort of understand more how to play, is there anything you'd do different if you could go back and coach your college teams now?
And I think a lot of that comes from the environment that they grew up in. Like I grew up, again, we didn't have the cell phones. We didn't have a lot of that stuff. We would play outside for hours. And we'd play football for a while, baseball for a while, basketball for a while. And I don't think the coaches that when we went to middle school, basically when we started, 7th grade or so, we didn't have people that were concerned with our instincts and feel as much as they want to refine us. And I think today's generation gets refined from the minute they start playing the game. They're told what to do. I said we've organized sport. I was talking to a coach once who was watching one of his players play outdoors at a Gus Macker tournament. And he wanted to yell him, and so he talked to him afterwards, and the kid said, well, I've never played outside before. So if I was coaching again, I don't know at the college level if I would do a 1-on-0 drill or a 2-on-0 drill. I'd realize that this different generation's grown up so much differently than probably they have. They don't understand that. I was talking to a coach at a Big Ten school, and they had a pro, and they're doing all the drills around the cones and chairs. And they said, well, maybe I missed it on this kid. Then they started scrimmaging, and the kid was killing everybody because he knew that he could play, and I think the park and the playground. So I think if I did anything different, to answer your question, I wouldn't do much 1-on-0 or 2-on-0, 3-on-0. I would try to get them to read the situation. I have a friend of mine, that former player that's now the development coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Sam Jones was an All-American at Northwood, played overseas for a number of years, and he's saying, like, they spend a lot of time on recognition drills. They'll do 2-on-0. Okay, now what happened there? And I think that was less likely back in the day because you're getting kids who are playing in the parks of Detroit or Chicago or whatever. They recognize things.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about too, Bob, which was interesting. I think it was maybe with Joel, Steve, where we talked about playing in the parks and how if you lost, that might be the only game you played all day. So kids had a different sort of mentality about winning and losing. Like you played knowing that it might be your last game of the day.
Well, I tell my kids all the time, like when I was young, you try to sound like, hey, I didn't walk to school 5 miles all uphill type of thing. You don't want to sound like that. But I said, when I was a kid, we actually had to win to get a trophy. That was just one of the differences in the generation. I was talking to an old football coach from Central Michigan, and they just had one gym back in the day, and the players played in the off season. He was lamenting the fact that we built this beautiful rec center. Now the kids never have to sit if they lose. He didn't like that as a football coach. He wanted the guys to have to win all the time to be able to stay on the court, which is one thing. Then it's hot, and you're sitting there and you're playing. Or if you don't play well to what the standards are, sometimes you don't get picked, and there's all those things. And that's just a different environment. We understand with organized sports, you're not going to pay $300 or $400 to go to tournaments, play one game and sit for 3 hours. So that's something I think we have to adjust to. But I think there's certainly a lot of things that were learned in the park or the playground that I think were great for kids that we've lost.
How do you enhance some kids' instincts? Some kids are just born ballers, and some aren't, but you can increase that value, that instinctual value in them. How do you go about doing that, Coach?
And that's what I talk about in the book a lot. Like we'll play 2-on-2, no dribble. We'll play 3-on-3, got to stay behind the free throw line. We'll say, okay, now you got 5 seconds to get a shot up. You know, I think you can work on instincts and feel just like you do fundamental. And I think it's needed because they're playing less. You know, like I said, I think that's something that I could see right away. These kids were playing like robots. I talk to a lot of parents all the time. I'm tired of watching my kid play like a robot. Well, I'm saying that's how they're getting trained. That's how you're coaching them. Why are you surprised that they're a robot? You know, I had, when my son was a 4th grader, I had a coach that said, man, it's great just to let him be the point guard. I know the ball gets on the court every time. And I'm saying, Jim, I like you as a coach. I don't want to interfere, but I'd like to see my son run ahead of the ball and try to figure out how to come back and get it. I like to see some other kid dribble the ball down the court. So if we just keep putting them in the same situation, why are we surprised that the kids aren't learning? Why are we surprised that they're not adapting? You know,
Right.
That to me is a bigger question.
Yeah. Yeah. They learn spacing. They learn, you know, when I know this, when, for instance, I coach special teams in the pros and in football, and you never know when you're going to have to play a different position because somebody might get hurt or whatever. And so almost every practice or every other practice, definitely, I'll switch. If you were the right guard on this side, and now you're the left guard, or you're the right tackle, now you're the left guard. If you're the this, you're the that. And because I want them to not become robotic, like you said, and I want them to understand the concept of football, the concept of where I am in this play, in this space, and where do I need to be effective and productive. And they understand the whole game, the whole concept, as opposed to, well, at this position, this is what I do, and this is what my coach told me to do, and I got to run to this spot. Well, that's not really how the game is played. It's a fluid sport, and you've got to see more. I always tell my guys, you've got to play with your eyes and ears wide open so you can be the best player that you can be. It's not a rote memory thing. You know, of course, the plays are a rote memory. You got to execute the play, but you also have to do it with a spirit, like you said, and a feel for the spacing and the game and the fluidity of the game.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And again, that's sort of what I'm saying is, especially like I really want to get to like 3rd through 6th, 7th grade to get what I call the good early start. And I'm convinced you wouldn't have to be on a travel team. But if you spent 2-on-2, 3-on-3 with outside, with the neighbor kids, with your parents, developing these instincts, and then we were big on like habits, like be able to make left-handed shots or work on your skills. I think you could be further ahead. And I think that's all part of what we're trying to do. And that's why I said with the program, it's kind of like the playground on steroids. You know,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you just have to go do that.
Well, I know this. I'd love to have my kids go to your camps and
I appreciate it.
learn that. And I'd love to go to your camp myself. Just, I love watching great coaches coach. And that's what this is all about. This is why Andy and I have gotten together to get great coaches. Great coaches come at all levels. They're not all, I think you're a pro coach no matter what level you coach, whether you're coaching 4th graders or people that are doing it for a living. You know, I think some of the best coaches are the coaches that coach our young people, because they'd never get to the other levels to where they can earn a living doing it if they don't get coached up somewhere, some way.
And I believe that a lot of young players, and you hear the successful pros, they go back and point to somebody at their youth level. This person helped me, whether it's a teacher or a coach. Though that's where it all starts. You know,
Yeah.
It's hard to just flip the switch.
You know, Bob,
was there a story about Larry Bird, I think, to that point, and I don't know if you told me that, Bob, where he went when he made big money. He bought his college coach a gold watch. He bought his high school coach a car, and he bought his youth coach a brand new house.
Well, I remember reading something like that, and Bird was like, "That's where I got the foundation."
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of things I read about Bird were interesting in that in French Lick there was a resort, and a lot of college kids worked the resort, and he would go out and play with them. You know, a lot of people kind of stereotype it. Well, he's an Indiana high school shooter. You know what I mean? I think a lot of these people got better. One of the things I'm a big advocate is always play against older kids. You know, just play against older kids as quick as you can, and you'll start to learn some of that feel
Absolutely.
and instinct. Is sort of like that monkey see, monkey do. Okay, well, he does that. I learned that, which is kind of fitting in the philosophy of the old man in the gym.
That's right. The more skilled competition you can get those kids involved with earlier, it's definitely going to help them. You know, when I lived in New Jersey and I was coaching for the New York Jets, we'd go over, you know, we go through New York City every once in a while and go through some of those boroughs, and you'd see these little kids outside on the basketball courts. It didn't matter if it was December, January, February, it didn't matter. It was cold outside. Those little dudes would be out there practicing basketball on the outdoor courts against high school kids, college kids, anybody that showed up. And, you know, that's how you increase your skill level. That's just phenomenal.
And that's what I keep trying to tell these parents and kids. Outdoor basketball or pre-play basketball is a big part of the game forever.
Yeah.
And they're talking to a lot of coaches now, and that the kids, why are the kids not playing that? Well, they feel like the inside organized team is safer. It's out of the area of the park. It's out of the area of the playground. You know, my thing is Michigan, and I'm a big Michigan fan. I mean, we've had some of the greatest players ever come out of Michigan. The incomparable George Gervin, you know, Magic Man, Magic Johnson. And these kids were coming from parks and playgrounds.
That's right.
And why have we stepped away from that? You know, to me, it was always kind of like when Chris Webber came about. You know, he
can't make as much money if you just have kids showing up at the park.
Right. Well, money's a big part of it. You know,
Yeah.
It's the organized play. You know, I always kind of like when I lamented the community rec director. You know, when I play, we had the keys to the gym. Our parents could get us in. Well, then we locked it up because we're afraid somebody's going to get hurt. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
And, well, I'd rather my kid in a gym than on the street. You know, and I want those kids to play, and I think we have to get back to that. And that's one of the things I'm pushing for is get them young. I'm trying to tell the parents, get them young.
Yeah.
Get them playing.
We'll push that for you, Coach. Why don't you hold your book up one more time? We're going to let you go. We just really appreciate having the old man in the gym on here, and we'll get your website out there, and we would love for every kid in the whole state of Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, what other – everywhere around there to go to your camps, because I really think it's a huge value for them and their parents.
And they can follow me. We do a lot of stuff on Old Man the Gym on Facebook. We have like clinics at a local basket we're doing. So I think the game's in the hands of the youth coach and the youth parent. And if you guys get them started early, you'll have a huge head start.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming on, Coach.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your
Thanks
time.